Hey everyone, testing, 1, 2. If you can hear me, drop a 2 in the chat. Thank you so much to those of you who let us know you couldn't hear our music. If you can hear me now, drop a 2 in the chat, please. All right, cool. Well, thank you. Thank you. I want to welcome you all to Fridays at the Fifth Long Distance. And before we start, let us know where you're tuning in from. Drop your city, state, or even country in the chat so that way we can know where you're at. Are you having a little bit of a gloomy day too? Would love to know that too. Send us some of your sun. We're here in Seattle where we don't get sun, but when we do, we are outside. So those of you who are here today, thank you so much for being here. Before we get started today, I want us to take a moment to remember that the Fifth Avenue Theater and the communities we serve are on the land and waterways of the Coast Salish people who have continuously inhabited our region since time immemorial. They are the original storytellers and theater makers of this place we call home. We also acknowledge and honor the tribal nations across Washington State and the many indigenous peoples from across the country who also live and work in the Seattle area. As we step into this new period of the Fifth's history, we hope to honor their legacies and bring greater attention to their continued fight for equality and recognition. In case this is your first time being here, my name is Aviana Rodriguez Brown. I use she, they pronouns and occasionally refer to myself in the we. I'm the education curriculum specialist here at the Fifth Avenue Theater, and today I am wearing a white and black African print bandana with pink headphones hidden behind my afro hair. I am of mocha brown skin and wearing a pink, bright pink collared shirt underneath a blue vest. And I also have 2 pins. One is a Mexican dessert called a concha, and the other is a golden rose, which is my grandmother's pin. And behind me, I have a white wall, but also some Christmas lights that are hanging and a sign that says racism is the pandemic. We want to be here on Fridays with students just like you, talking about topics you're interested in. So, do you have something you want to hear us talk to professionals about? Do you want to talk to professionals about it? Drop your suggestions in the chat, or if you're watching this post, you can always email me at A as in apple, R as in rabbit, brown like the color, at fifthavenue.org. Thank you so much. We wouldn't be here without you. And today's session was requested by you. So let's get to it. I want to bring on our first youth panelist for today's workshop. Maya, where are you at? Hey, Maya, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Maya. I use she, her pronouns. And today I am wearing a gray sweater. My hair is in a bun. I am wearing hoop earrings. I have brown skin. And behind me, I have LED lights, some vines up, and my hiking stick because I love to hike.
Beautiful. And here at the Fifth, we like to notate our high notes for the week. So please tell us, what was your high note this week?
Well, my high note this week was getting to go back to school for the first time in over a year. I was able to see my friends and just be able to socialize with like plenty of people. And I think that was like the biggest high note this week.
Did y'all hear that? Maya here, I assume you go to Seattle school. Maya here is back in school. I see some of you out in Smoky Point, some of you in Bothell, Arlington. Tell us, are you guys back in school? Go ahead and drop it in the chat. We'd like to know. Thank you very, very much, Maya. We're going to bring on our second student panelist. Ives, who is a recent graduate of Blaine High School. Hi, Ives. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Ives. I use they, them pronouns. I am a white person with a harsh green mullet. I have some very harsh black eyebrows, gold and black frame glasses. I have a lot of rouge on, and I've got some little black earrings and a black t-shirt. Behind me, you see my dorm room wall and some of my roommates' fairy lights. My high note from this past week, I was lucky enough to, some of my friends and I in my bubble, we were able to go take a mini vacation and explore some local nature sites. We got to poke around some hiking trails. We got stuck in a marsh for a little while, and we got to look around some tide pools at Yaquina Head. It was a whole lot of fun, and I am so grateful for that lovely little vacation I got to take.
Yes, we are an outdoors crew, especially mine. When you talked about your hiking stick, I'm looking at mine. I'm like, I need to get out. So you guys are just inspiring me to go hit a trail this weekend. Thank you so much. And we see you guys. Okay, some other people are in a hybrid model. Some people aren't even going back till May 10th. Very interesting. It's interesting how the back to school rollout has been. Ives, real quick, are you guys in person or totally online?
We've got a hybrid system going. Right now, I'm on campus, and 2 of my classes are in person, 3 are online. But it's a little bit different for everyone. We have some students who are entirely remote and others who are entirely in person. Just depends on the classes you're taking.
Understood. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Now, we can't really get too far into this without bringing on our adult panelists. So if you guys want to head backstage, I'm going to bring on our first adult. And I have to tell you a little bit about this panelist because Desdemona Chiang is renowned throughout Seattle and the Pacific Northwest. So just listen up. Desdemona Chiang is a stage director based in Seattle, Washington, and Ashland, Oregon. And if I remember correctly, I think Desdemona, you're in California right now. Lucky. She is the co-founder of Azotope here in Seattle and has directed all over the Pacific Northwest. Some directing credits include the Girdle Theater, Alley Theater, South Coast Repertory, Oregon Shakespeare Festival, Pittsburgh Public Theater, Baltimore Center Stage, California Shakespeare Theater, Seattle Repertory Theater, Playmakers Repertory Company, Studio Theater, Long Wharf Theater, Seattle Children's Theater, Act Theater Seattle, American Shakespeare Theater, Seattle Shakespeare Company, Village Theater, and the list continues to go on and on. We are so lucky to have her here today. Desdemona holds a BA from the University of California at Berkeley and an MFA in directing from the University of Washington School of Drama. Desdemona, welcome.
Hello. My God, that intro was so long. I'm like, hello, everybody. It's good to be here. Yeah.
Can you introduce yourself today and tell us a little bit of your high note of the week?
Totally. I felt like, you just kind of went and I was like, oh, that was my intro. That was great. Hi, everybody. I am Desdemona Chiang. My pronouns are she, hers. I am actually zooming in from California. Yes, I am coming in from the land of the Tongva, AKA Los Angeles, California, where it is balmy 75 degrees outside. It's kind of, we don't really have winter here in LA. So I've been with my parents here for the past few weeks. So that's what pandemic has done. Self-description, I am of Chinese descent. I have straight black hair that is pulled back into a ponytail. I am currently wearing red glasses and a brown top, and I'm in a room with pink walls, and I'm sitting in a leather beige office chair. Oh, and my high note. So my high note is, I guess there's 2 high notes. One high note, I got vaccinated a few days ago. Yay, my first shot, Pfizer. And then my other high note is that I've been hanging out with my 98-year-old grandma, which is awesome and also like intense because grandmas are intense. But my grandma can't really, because of pancreatic issues, she can't have sugar. So I've been getting really, really into like keto baking and made like muffins that were like coconut flour, almond flour that didn't suck. So it's challenging. It's hard. Baking without gluten and without carbs is hard. Just saying. Props to those who can do it.
More power to you for even trying. It is very hard to cut any ingredients out of anything, but specifically gluten and specifically sugar, when literally everything is now made of gluten or sugar. I applaud you. And I'm sure your grandma's so happy about it.
She ate it. She was like, oh, something that resembles sweets. I'll eat it.
And as far as the weather goes, please drop a 2 in the chat if you would rather be in 76-degree weather. That sounds amazing. And I know what you mean as far as like not having a quote unquote winter. A friend of mine also lives in LA and was like, it's it's like 67 here and it's cold. Yes. And I was like, come on.
Come on.
No. We're from the Pacific Northwest. That's not cold at all. Well, thank you again so much for agreeing to do this and be here today. Super excited to get into today's workshop, but we have to bring on Kathryn Van Meter. And so I'm going to read Kathryn's. I see you, Mark. Thank you for acknowledging that 76 is not cold. So I'm going to read Kathryn's bio as well. And I apologize that these feel overwhelming. You guys are just both amazing. So Kathryn Van Meter is an award-winning multidisciplinary theater artist whose 20-plus year career encompasses work as a director, a choreographer, an actor, and an educator. A champion of large-scale community theatrical adventures, Kathryn choreographed As You Like It for Seattle Repertory Theater's Public Works program. Kathryn's work as a teaching artist has taken her around the world, from Iowa to South Africa to Siberia. Kathryn was also a resident choreographer for the Netflix original series 13 Reasons Why, which I know a lot of you have watched. And in 2016, she worked with the U.S. Department of Labor to develop the national definition for the occupation of choreographer. This is great for us moving forward. She is a 2-time Gregory Award winner for choreography for Mary Poppins and Matilda, and the 2018 People's Choice winner for directing Matilda. Kathryn as well holds a BA in theater and a minor in dance from the College of William and Mary. She serves on the National Board of Governors for AGMA and the Seattle Liaison Committee for Actors Equity, as a co-chair for the Seattle Steering Committee for the Society of Directors and Choreographers. Kathryn, please join us. Hello, welcome.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. So good to be here. Thank you for having me, Aviana. My name is Kathryn. I use she, her pronouns. I am a white woman with brown hair. I have sort of a ruddy complexion on this day from our last week of 75-degree weather. I am in a heather gray shirt that has a v-neck, and I'm wearing some earrings made by the lovely and talented Shawnice Omar that say "We Stand Together." I'm in my kitchen. I'm in a little nook off the corner of my kitchen, and so there's white walls behind me, and in the corner you can see some pictures of my nephews on my refrigerator. My high note of the week. Do I have the ability to put things in the chat?
If you drop it in the chat, Jeremy can share it for us. Jeremy's working on the stage.
I will. My high note for the week, I am like dying to get back in a space where people can dance, like hundreds of people dancing. And I love a good like summer, what feels like a summertime, like just jump up and down dance tune. And I was introduced to this tune earlier this week. Jeremy will drop it in the chat. It's called Into the Light. And it is like, I have just been jumping up and down to it all week. So maybe you will find a little joy and movement as well from that tune.
So exciting. Yes, we here always love a new song. So please, yes, and thank you. And as far as movement goes, I usually listen to this type of music to clean to. So I'm excited to get into that, especially this
Yes,
weekend.
yes.
Thank you so much. Before we want to just jump right in here because we want to get our students back on stage. But before we do, I know Desdemona, in our talking about this workshop, we talked about how the defining of the word intention is actually important when we actually move in to a room together. So can you please explain a little bit about why we as a cohort need to come to a common ground under this word?
Yeah, and I mean, I would also welcome Kathryn if you have any thoughts on this too. Part of this, I personally am someone that fixates on language because as directors, that's all we have, right? We're not the bodies on stage. We didn't build the set. We didn't make the clothes. We're not pulling the rail or pressing the go button or anything. So really, I always have this moment in tech rehearsal when I'm sitting next to my assistant and we have a moment where we're watching everybody tech and everyone's doing their work. And I just tell this person, just so you know, everyone is doing stuff on this stage because of things we said, right? And so when we talk about intention, even the idea of what does intention mean? And we have a Webster's definition, Webster's dictionary definition, which I will share with the group. And Webster's defines intention as a bending or a stretching or bending of the mind towards an object, closeness of application, fixedness of attention, earnestness, and also the object towards which the thought is directed or aimed. You can just Google that. You don't have to write that down, right? But that's a very like textbook stuffy way of thinking about it. And I would even say the word intention for me, it might not be what it means for you, but it's important to articulate what that means, right? And I think what is intention versus vision versus an agenda, right? Those are all things that have different connotations when you use them. And I think for the purposes of this definition, we might be using the words intention and vision synonymously. But I would also open the floor to my fellow panelists to see if you have any thoughts on what the word intention means and how you might think of how you would define that for yourselves.
I was actually like shocked by how much I enjoyed this definition of the Webster definition of intention. This like the idea of stretching or bending of the mind towards an object. Like it just made me think of like a plant leaning towards sunlight, and this idea of like my intention, I am bending towards something, I'm stretching towards something, and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm gonna get to it. It doesn't mean I'm gonna like touch it or poke at it, but like I'm really gonna try. I'm gonna bend or stretch as far as I can to try to achieve this thing, which I may not actually ever get. And that just feels so resonant about directing, period, right? Like you have an idea and you're going to try to funnel everything towards that. You're going to bend and stretch to try to get as many things pointed towards the object, right? Pointed towards your vision as you can. And you may never actually touch it, but you're sure going to try.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Maya, Ives, any thought on intention, or if that resonates with you the way it does with Kathryn?
Yeah, if we don't mind me speaking first, I really love this little Webster definition that we pulled up when I was thinking about intention and the theme for this Fridays at the 5th. My first thought, first thing that came to mind was when I'm directing and I'm looking at a scene or a whole show, what's the first thing that I want, and what do I want the audience to see when they're viewing this piece of work? And then my mind just goes to, how can I as a director make everyone see the same thing that I have in my head, and what choices can I make to make that possible?
Um, because like whenever I am even doing like the littlest bit of directing, I like close my eyes and I'm like, okay, what do I want to see, and like what intentions do I have in creating this? And I find like whatever words or like that very first vision, and I'm like, okay, that's my intention and that's what I want to see and what I want to come out of this. And I think that that's like my number one thing of like intention is just like, it's like you have a tree and you planted those roots and now you want to watch that thing grow, and that intention was that first seed.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, I mean, it's like there's almost like two parts to this, the idea of intention, right? Like Kathryn said, the thing that you're bending towards, this idea that intention has an arc or a journey, which is rehearsal, right? And then so there's the intention, which is the thing you see, Maya, right? The vision you have, which is the intention. And then there's my intending there. So it's kind of dual, right? There's like the intention that is the end point, and then there's the journey of my intention that may or may not take us to the intention that I'm intending. So the word itself has for me, a dualistic function, right? It is both the thing I want to get to and the path I take to get there. And I think sometimes, however we use that word in context, it may mean one thing or the other. It's just interesting to me that it has that there's also a target, right? And as you talk about an audience, I'm also a director who always has an audience in mind. I know some directors don't. Some directors say, I have a thing and I do the thing, and they kind of intend without thinking about where it's going or who's receiving it. Like who's the party receiving your intention, right? And I think in social justice, we talk a lot about intention and impact. That's a very, right, like what's your intention, what's the impact? So oftentimes, if you think about intent, there's my intention and then there's my intention. Anyway, so I guess that's a good way of just, if we can kind of come to a common agreement on that, there's a kind of dualistic function of this word. And that sometimes the word may mean one thing, the verb, or the other thing, the noun. I don't know. We'll see what comes of today. Yeah.
Absolutely. And as far as when we're in a rehearsal room, how important do you find it to be that we actually define those words before we actually start any of the work? And this is for any of the directors in the room.
Yeah, I think communication in general, it's important to define vocabulary words, right? I think more and more in any context, the same word can mean a very different thing to different people, depending on the context in which they were first introduced to that word, or maybe they were never introduced to that word. So I think defining vocabulary words and agreeing on definitions for words is one of the ways that we can make an inclusive space to help sort of say, okay, these are the definitions that we are agreeing upon when we use these words in this space to create.
Yeah, I think as the director, one of the functions that I think the director has is we have the responsibility of setting the standard for how the process is going to go, right? A mentor of mine used to say, like, think of rehearsal as your cocktail party, and you are the host of that cocktail party. You have to make sure that there are drinks on the table, that there's snacks available, that your guests are mingling, that people are, right? That there is also, like, on top of making the play, there's also the managing of the humans that you're working with in this room. And I think part of being a good host in rehearsal is making sure that we're all in agreement about certain things. And I think oftentimes, because there's an assumption around common training practices, like when I say objective, people have a certain idea. Oh, I know what an objective is, right? But I use the word action instead of objective. Like right, because we come from different training philosophies and our instructors use different words. And so we tend to inherit the language that was brought to us by our instructors. And I can't assume that when I say action, you think obstacle. And I think it might feel like tedious to go over things like, all right, so when I say this, I really mean this. And there's a lot of eye roll. I think I tend to think of it like years and years ago, when we started doing pronouns in the room, there was a lot of eye rolling when folks are doing, it's like, oh, it's so obvious and we all know what pronouns are, right? And it's like, no, we actually don't. And when we don't acknowledge that there's potentially different opinions or different philosophies around words, we fall into the trap of assumptions, right? And so I think being very, very candid and being very transparent about language use, and as the director coming forward with your definition of the words first, and then offering a platform for conversation, can be useful. Even though it might sound repetitive and unnecessary, I think it's more useful than we think. Yeah.
I was muted. Thank you, all of you, for really just encapsulating what intention and vision looks like, especially for the directors, because it's really important for us actors to be able to understand how we're moving forward. And folks in the audience definitely dropped a question in the chat, but have you yourself ever been in a rehearsal room where you didn't understand the verbiage used or the intention behind a scene, but the director just went straight in and started directing you? And that, yes, all right, thank you. Yeah, I think that those are really important moments to even call out and just say, hold, can we clarify something real quick? Because I don't understand and I want to understand. And I think that that's not a difficult actor to ask questions. Please ask questions. Please ask questions.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize that enough, right? Like, actors have been conditioned to be agreeable and not a problem. And it's actually, as directors, it is incumbent upon us. It is actually our job, right? The number of times I have asked actors, are there any questions? And they'll go, nope, no questions. Even when you make the offer, expect that because of the power dynamic in the room, that they're always going to want to please you, right? So really, it's a nut I have yet to crack. I don't know what else other than saying, am I not being clear when I say X, Y, Z? Because I think sometimes I'm not clear when I say X, Y, and Z. So if you volunteer a little bit of fallacy in the work, then it opens up the space for permission to speak up.
I also think another great way to model that is to not know everything all the time, right? Like, if you, as the leader in the room, don't always have all the answers and are okay with asking your own questions and are okay with saying like, oh, I actually don't know that right now, like, let me get back to you, then it helps model inside the space that it is a space where uncertainty is okay, and like questioning and curiosity is welcome.
Yeah. And for me, it just dilutes the power dynamic too, which is always the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I wonder, now that we're on the same page, how then do we actually approach a scene? And I know that our panelists brought some scenes for us to look at today, but
yeah, let's take a look at this scene. So we're gonna do a cold read of this A-B scene, and I think Jeremy, let's do scene 5. So I think Maya, if you would like to be person A, and Ives, if you would like to be person B, and we'll just go ahead and give this a read. So this is a cold read, right? We're listening to see what we're listening for, right? But it's not about acting or performing. We're just doing a read to hear the text.
Great. Okay. All right. I guess I'll start.
So
It's up to you.
never again.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
From now on,
As you say,
reconsider.
not this time.
Ever?
Great. Beautiful. Beautiful. I love like a giant blank canvas of text that could be any number of 1 million things, right? So let's talk about maybe like relationship first. Who do you think um who do you think might be talking to each other, or what were some clues that came up about who these people might be? And is this a moment where we can also have like folks drop in the chat what their ideas are as well? Yeah, let's do that. And maybe Aviana, you can sort of pop some things back into space. But Maya, let's start with you. Did you have a relationship idea that sprung into your mind?
I think the very first thing that I thought was like either like two people that were friends and they liked each other, or like a couple, like something kind of romantic was the first thing that came to my mind, as they were like, never again, like, no, this is never gonna happen again. I was like, oh, that reminds me of like a couple, or like friends that might be more. I don't know.
Great, great. And Ives, how about you?
What's so funny is I had the exact same first impression. I read it. My very first thought was, this is friends who have something going on. I think it's so fun that we had the same like immediate interpretation of the scene.
Yeah, Aviana, are there responses that are coming up in chat as well?
Not quite yet. They're still witnessing the scene.
Great. So Maya and Ives, what do you think it is about the text that made you think that? Are there specific things you can point to that say, oh, that piece actually makes me think?
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, go for it.
oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. I was just gonna say, like, I think the not like not ever, not this time, like those words of like something obviously happened and they're just trying to cut it off. So I think that something happening was like that was the indicator to me that like, oh, that's what this might be, or like that's the relationship that they might have. And like even just in the beginning and how dry everything sounds, it just that's really what came to my mind.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, with the language at the beginning of the lots of ellipses, lots of very short phrases, so never again, stuff like that. It gave me the immediate impression that something had happened, and then with the very like quick snippy, that's it, then like the as you say, it gave me the impression that they had some sort of like close relationship and they knew each other very well beforehand. So just like putting together these like as you say, assuming that it's a phrase this person says a lot, that's how I kind of connected the dots a little bit.
Yeah, beautiful. Is there anything, I mean, it feels like we're talking about relationship, beautiful. There's a little bit about like the like given circumstances of time, right? That it seems like they've known each other for a while. Is there anything inside the text that you can tell about like where we might be? Or is there something that immediately popped into your mind about where we might be, about where you imagine this scene to take place?
Or like even like time. Does time matter?
Like time of day, time, any kind of time, current,
Yeah,
like
it could
time.
be time of day, or it could be like, I mean, it sounds like from what I'm hearing, both directors feel like it's modern day, present time, right? It's not like set in the 1500s. I don't know. It could be. As you say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll be honest. I don't think I have a specific location or time of day, but like, I don't know, really thinking about it, I kind of get a vibe that it might be, I don't know, this isn't a time of day or a location, but I feel like they're standing and it's the afternoon. Like, I feel like this is something happened maybe the night before and they're meeting up to talk about it, maybe on a lunch break at school, or it's a weekend and they're grabbing coffee to discuss or something. But I just get like, it's noon and we're standing up awkwardly type vibes.
I got like, yeah, I got the very similar impression of like they are meeting to talk to like end things, and it's just like it's gonna be over after this. But since whatever happened the night before, it's super awkward now, so they're not the same. And it's like I picture like their cars are like right there, and they're in like a parking lot or like a park or like a field, and they're just kind of standing there like super awkward, like, so like, what do you want to say? It's just like that's what it reminds me of.
Rebecca actually says, I think this is an older and younger sibling. One character is younger and is checking in and giving the power to the older one with the quote, "It's up to you."
Nice, Rebecca.
I'm always fascinated by these exercises because this is more of a philosophical comment, because oftentimes when we tell stories, we're telling things in time and space. And the version of Hamlet I do today is not the same as the Hamlet I do next year or last year, because I feel like in so many ways, my day-to-day life subliminally affects the choices I make on stage, right? So this question around intention and, you know, the ideas I'm hearing from both panelists today, I do think, just for the purposes of, you know, this exercise, this is happening in like a time capsule, right? This is your vision of the scene in this moment, in this time where you are with the psychology you have at this moment. I'd be really curious if you were to come back and look at the scene 10 years from now, if you would think the same thing, right? And so I think when directors come with a concept or a vision or an intention around a piece of work, we can't help but bring ourselves into the material. Right. So I wondered, like, oh, what made Rebecca think older and younger sibling? Does Rebecca have siblings? And I went, you know, so and it's not about therapy. That's not my intention. You know, but I don't know. I mean, was it useful? Like, Kathryn, did you have an idea of what this was when you first read it? I'm curious about what, you know, what are maybe, yeah.
To me, it was like crime based. Like,
I totally thought it was.
Did you have the same thought too?
I thought it was a bake heist.
Yeah, it was a heist. It was a heist for sure. And that like, and it was the like some like Ocean's 11, right? Like they're in front of the Bellagio, right? But that it was that it's something that like a crime had happened, and they were like really, they had to be really surreptitious about like, you know. And one of them is like, for sure, we're not doing this again. And one of them probably could have been talked into it, but like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, I had a very similar thought. I literally thought like bank robbery, bags of money, and they're like, no, never again. And then like at one point, like was it B or something? Whoever like has second thoughts opens the bag and sees all the cash, and it's like maybe one more, and it's like, nope, you said no, we said no, so we're dropping it. It was crime based for me too.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I had a different take entirely. So that's also interesting. But this is stemming again from bringing your own life in. I just had a play reading of a play that I wrote where there's 4 sisters and they take a hike, and one is like completely against it, hates it the whole time. So I saw this as 2 people just got down from a hike.
Awesome. Well, if we think about this idea of like sort of a way to synthesize 4 possible ideas. 1, the idea of like you bring yourself into the room, right? Wherever you go, there you are, even in your work. 2nd is the idea of this idea that Desdemona offered earlier of like, who's your audience? Who are you making your play for, right? And then this idea of like intention as the end goal and intention as a way to get to the end goal. If like you know, if the mission for Ives and Maya was to direct the premiere of scene 5 right now, right in this moment, and like your audience is the people that are, you know, witnessing us now live on Zoom or witnessing us later, can you have a sense of like, in the things that you saw in the scene, like, oh, this is what I would want the audience to take away from. This would be my intention in creating this scene. And this might be a way that I would direct the actors to know how to get there. It's a big question that, yeah. But like, what comes up out of those things?
Was the question clear? Do we need to restate it?
Can we
It is a big question, to be fair.
Yeah. So if this were a whole play, right? And you have an idea of who you think in your mind, like who you think, who or what you think this relationship is, right? That there's some sort of conflict that's happening. What would your end point of this scene, of this play be? Like, you would want to direct actors in this scene to create a relationship in order to affect an audience in this way.
Yeah, I guess another way would be to think of it like, do you think there's a moral to this scene? It's a very, very, that's a very like, it might be an equally loaded question, right? And because oftentimes when you direct a play has an intention or a message or a moral. And, you know, we just got this today, so your answers can change. Speak and draft, as Nicole Brewer says. So just curious if you had any thoughts in the moment around what that might be.
Yeah, I suppose if this was a thing that we were to direct right now at the moment, I feel like, you know, whether or not it'd be a part of like a greater work that I'm sure would make this relationship and this circumstance a whole lot more clear. The first thing I would do as a director is, you know, with my cast, make my intention and my vision for this scene clear, especially since we have so many interpretations of it. Like the fact that Maya and I both said they're friends with a little more. You, Kathryn, Desdemona, said it was a bank heist, and then someone in our audience said they were brother and sister. That's a lot of, excuse me, siblings, not brother and sister. That's so many different interpretations. So I would make my vision for this clear so that my actors can then make informed decisions to, you know, do a more accurate and specific reading of this in a way that would embody these characters and embody these roles that I'm imagining in my head, and then therefore make this text more clear to an audience who might not have those same immediate reactions.
Thanks.
I think that I would want to like tell the cast that like I'd want them to be like as dry and like as awkward as possible, and just like I'd want them to like I want the audience to see like in the past, like if this was like a whole thing and they were, and since we know that they were friends, like just watching like maybe the moral, I don't know if you'd really even call this like a moral of the story, but like it like watching people go from like being very good friends to having different emotions and different feelings come up like within themselves, and then through that like their friendship kind of falls apart. And I'd want to tell the cast that and tell like the actors that, so then that could be like very clear to the audience and showing the audience how like emotions can fluctuate and change.
And from our audience, there's so many different thoughts on this, but Paige also points out that this scene may have a bitter ending and these two characters may split up at the end. And Flint, I hope I'm saying that right, Flint also points out that probably the moral is something that relates to relationships or trust or boundaries. There's a wide scope, but then you have to eventually get to the point.
Yeah. Yes. So the interesting, and then I'm going to go off on, I speak very philosophically often, so pardon me. One of the reasons why we picked a really open scene or very neutral scene is because there's so much potential in this scene, right? And we just heard 4 or 5 different interpretations of what the scene could be. And one of our jobs as directors, when we're starting to carve out intention, is to start deciding what things can be. And I think oftentimes decision making is really scary, because once we say yes to something, we're saying no to everything else it can be, right? And I'm sure you've heard this before, but the job of a director is to make choices. Like, that is literally our job. Our job is to make choices. You can say things like, my job is to stage the play, my job is to like help actors do this or that, or like have a vision, but ultimately, like, the function of it, someone has to be responsible for the choices that get made around the show, right? So when you say there's siblings, the terror of them being anything other than that is so great that we're sometimes reluctant to make the decision, right? But I think what's essential to honing intention and to being intentional about it is to have the courage to say yes, because saying yes does mean saying no, right? And Anne Bogart speaks so eloquently about this too. She has a wonderful book called The Director Prepares by Anne Bogart. She talks about decision making as an act of violence, right? Every time, because you're essentially killing possibility when you say yes to something. And that can be very terrifying. So this idea of keeping things open, and we want to be open to ideas, and maybe, right, that is useful to a certain point. And after a certain point, you have to decide, because that's how you draw the arc of your intention. Yeah. Very broad conversation, very broad thing I'm talking about. But I think, right, because you can kind of feel it as you have these impulses around, oh, I think it's this. There's a little part of you that's like, well, I don't know. What if is it the best thing I can come up with? Right. And you can decide when you want the ink to dry on that decision. But at some point, the ink has to dry on that decision because the show has to open. Right. Yeah.
Wow, that's very, even though it was broad, it definitely comes back to what we're talking about here as far as like what and how we define intention, where we decide to take that intention and what vision we bring in for the whole world, and what we are bringing in to the room from our life experience, from our day, from the year we all just had together and separated. All of those things play a part as far as how we are choosing, making choices to tell this story. Now, sadly, I'm looking at the time, and I know that this conversation, it could go on forever because we could just dissect this one scene, but I want to send out to the audience that we have these wonderful artists here at your fingertips. So please drop your questions in the chat. We encourage all questions that start with the word how, because as you see, we could talk on it for a minute. So please definitely drop your questions in the chat. But I know our lovely student panelists also have some questions. Maya, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So one question I ask like every director that I meet, it's just like, what was the first moment that you had where you were like, gosh, I want to do this. I want to be a director.
Kathryn, do you want to go first, or should I go?
Mine, I came to directing like via choreography. So that was where I started making worlds and making shapes and moving bodies in space and telling story with movement and and wanting to be in charge of it and having people listen to me and follow. So there was that piece for me. That's my short answer. Desdemona?
Yeah, I started directing because I couldn't get cast and stuff. I was too crappy of an actor to get cast, and I just kept wanting to. I mean, I didn't really do college. I didn't do theater until college. And I just kept wanting to hang out with the drama kids. I have a degree in biology. I was a bio major in college, and the bio kids were no fun, but all the drama kids were super cool and had better parties. And I could never get cast and stuff. And so I was like, I got to a point in my junior year where I said, you know what? If I'm not being picked, I'll be the one doing the picking. And I didn't know what directors even did, really. I just knew that shows had one. I was never cast in anything, so I couldn't watch a director work. But I was like, you know what? I'll just take the intro to directing class in my drama department. And once I took that class, I was like, oh, I like this way better. I get to like read plays and like problem solve, and my nerdy science brain was really into that. And so I think that's kind of how I felt. It was because I just wanted to be with my friends. That's really why I started directing. And I couldn't get cast and stuff.
Ives, take it away.
We want another question, maybe?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Oh, I have so many. This is difficult. All right. Well, recently I was told by one of my directors, I was doing a little like cutting of Red. I was playing Rothko, and one of my friends was directing, and they said that a director should never say anything unless they are 100% sure they can say it in a fashion that their cast will be able to clearly understand. And I am not the greatest at organizing my thoughts in a way that other people understand. So do either of you have any tips for organizing the words I'm trying to say in a way that's coherent for others to digest and take in?
You want to go first on this one?
Yeah, the never saying anything until you're 100% sure, I find unhelpful because I'm never 100% sure. I would never speak if that was the case. This may not work for everybody, right? And so here's my caveat. Anything Kathryn and I share with you today is strictly from the point of view of myself and Kathryn, right? I personally never find it useful to withhold information from an actor. Even when it's incomplete, even when it's wrong, I always preface it by saying, this is how I feel right now at this moment. I might change my mind tomorrow, but let's do this, right? And as long as there's always a little asterisk of, right, it's like you're Google Docking. It's a living document, right? Nothing you say is ever set in stone. It's often why directors don't come back after opening, because the play opens and 2 days later you're like, oh shoot, it should have been that. I was wrong or something. Like I have had many shows where I've had like the week after I like solved it. Oh well, it opened, right? I feel like, as far as the concern around being understood by the actors, you, over the course of your career, you will find people who understand how you work. And those are the folks you hold on to. You will find folks who don't like how you work, who don't know what you're saying. Maybe those are the folks you don't keep working with, right? It's a kind of culling and honing process as you start to develop your brain trust and your posse of friends that you go back to over and over again to work with, because of that very thing, because of communication, right? But I never think it's useful to withhold, unless it's something you think that's harmful, then yeah, hold it back if it's harmful. But if it's something that, if it's information, it only helps to solve the problem if we're all aware of where you're at, right? And your collaborators don't want to be left in the dark. Actors and designers don't want to feel like, oh, the director is thinking something, but they're not telling me. That kind of that erodes the trust between people.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things. The first one is, if you start a rehearsal process and you know all the answers, then there's no need to rehearse and there's no need to have actors, right? Because like by the nature of collaborating with other artists, there has to be space for them to influence your thoughts and opinions and intentions about the work that you're going to do, right? So in that way, like that sort of ties into what Desdemona says about like not being 100%, because there has to be room to be influenced and inspired by the other artists that you're working with. And then in terms of being understood, part of that goes back to vocabulary words, right? Like defining words. So taking the time in the beginning of a space to say like, this is what I mean when I say this. What do you mean when you say this? And then the third thing I would offer is like, um, it's okay to be comfortable with silence. It's okay to take time before you speak and gather your thoughts, right? There can be a lot of pressure to speak right away or respond to a lot of stimuli really quickly. And if that's not how you best organize your thoughts, then don't feel pressure to respond in that way.
And you could always say, I don't know right now, but I'll find out.
Yep.
Right? Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Maya, before you go, I do have a question from the audience. And this is from Rebecca. When you see an actor in the audition room, how do you look for and identify strong intention in such a short time in a way that the actor interprets the scene? I'm assuming this is possibly a callback, or it seems like it might be a callback situation.
Yeah. So this is what's tricky with the audition. I do not look for the actor's intention or interpretation of the scene to match mine, because they're not in my head. And it's unfair for me to assess their audition based on whether or not they guess the same thing as I've guessed what the play is about, right? If someone comes in and does a wildly different take on the role, I say, great, you give them one note and you have them do it again. What I'm looking for in the actor that I want to cast is, does that actor can they act? Do I believe them when they say the words that they're saying? Right. And are they communicating that transparently and without any kind of barrier? And are they being completely open with me in the room? Am I receiving the performance? And then the second thing is, what is it about this character? What is the essential thing about this character in the play that I need to see from that actor? Right? If this is a character that is incredibly vulnerable, does that actor have the vulnerability I'm looking for? And it's not whether or not they're nailing the scene. It's about whether or not they have the character quality that I need. And that's enough to get them to the next step. Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Maya.
Okay, well, I guess I have a little bit of a lighter question here. Who is your role model, like, in anything, well, for directing, but like any person, anybody?
Kathryn, who is your role model?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'll speak like a little bit of truth. So in all the performing that I did as an actor and continue to do, I've maybe had a female director twice. In all of the choreography that I have done, I have collaborated with a female director once. So it's not really fair to tell you who my mentor is in terms of telling you like who they're not. But you know, it has been a pretty male dominated field for a really long time. And I have certainly like learned skills and things from folks along the way. But I have felt a deep lack of the kind of mentorship that I wished I had, trying to become a strong female leader in my career.
Yeah, I share very similar feelings, Kathryn, as far as the folks who've hired me to do work. Just because we're of a different era, and I think the field is shifting in ways that I think will hopefully bring good. I don't know if y'all know so Sheryl Sandberg, who was the COO of Facebook, wrote this book called Lean In, and it's about women taking a seat at the table. It's an imperfect book, but it was like one of the first books that come about female leadership, and in it she talks about the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. And I would say that in my life, I haven't had many mentors. I had one mentor in graduate school, Valerie Curtis Newton, who was the head of directing at University of Washington. She's amazing. And I think she's the closest thing I've had to a mentor. But I've had many sponsors, right? A mentor is someone who you can look at and say, oh, I want to do what you do, right? I want to have the career that you have, and you are a model for the track that I want to build for myself. A sponsor is someone who is not the person you want to emulate because they're not you. They're like, for me, I have a lot of like white older men sponsors, but that person is someone who can advance your career, right? They advocate for you, they hire you, they introduce you to people. So Richard E.T. White, who is a chair at Cornish, has been a huge sponsor for me at my time in Seattle. John Jory, who was one of my professors at UW, was a huge sponsor for me. So these are, right, there's a difference between the sponsor is someone who I see as it's a business asset, right? They're useful, but they can't speak to you. They can't have like the real talk, heart to heart, this is rough. And right, whereas Val would be like, okay, this is rough. The heart-to-heart mentor stuff, your sponsor might not be able to do. So there's the difference between those, and they're both valuable for different reasons, right? So I would offer Valerie Curtis Newton as my mentor in Seattle. And then there's just things like, mom, grandma, the strong ladies in my life are always role models. And I kind of like dismissively say that, but yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I have like this beautiful bevy of aunties that's like a generation ahead of me in the Seattle theater scene. And because I've lived here for 20 years now, that they have like really watched me grow up in a way that that like I can sort of call on them and they don't, that neither feels mentory nor sponsorshipy, but like a third tier of elders, right? Of like leaning into a community and honoring your community of elders and developing that.
Thank you both. Wow. That's so true as far as like mentorship. We're going to take one question from each of our panelists and then we're going to sadly close. But these are such good questions and they're so juicy. So Ives, go ahead and take it away.
All right. To sort of follow up with what we've just been talking about with like, sponsors and mentors and whatnot, do either of you have any tips for making connections in the industry? And that being said, do you have any, once you have those connections, do you have any tips for getting a foot in the door?
I have felt not awesome in my career about like like knowing how to like work the room or do the thing that feels like the thing that's shiny, right? And I can also be a person that is impatient. So the main thing that I will offer is that like that there is something to be said for building relationships, and that takes time, right? So that as you start to see people whose work that you like, or you have a great conversation with somebody randomly at a panel for the Fifth Avenue on a Friday, right? That like you follow up with those artists, right, who are older than you and say like, hey, I had a really great time meeting you. I would love to keep in touch, right? And those artists, if they're willing to give their time on a Friday, are more than likely to say like, yes, we should totally keep in touch, right? And then and then there's two, right? And this social media platform thing is really interesting too. Like I have been taking some like online classes with very famous choreographers who are like just delighting me, and I find them very funny. And then I DM them on Instagram and was like, your class was amazing. Thank you so much for making me laugh. And then they respond, and now we're like talking. I'm like, oh, this, and then I feel like I'm 12, like fangirling out about like Carrie Ann and Greeley. But, and then part of it is about just like not being afraid to ask, right? Like that we're all people, and you can, I mean, years ago, I reached out to the one and only Desdemona Chiang, and I was like, can we have coffee, and could you tell me how to be as awesome as you are? And she so graciously was like, yes. And like, we had this beautiful coffee, and she, gave me so much beautiful information about questions very similar to the one you're asking right now, Ives, to be clear. And I was 15 years into my career. So yeah, a huge part of it is not being afraid to ask, and then following up on the connections that you happen to make wherever you happen to make them.
Yeah, I would also say that the idea of networking can feel a little like icky because it's so like slippery and snaky and bleh, right? And it's not like, it's like the opposite of making art, which is what we want to do in the theater. So I think you have to keep making the work that matters to you, even as you're doing snaky, slippery, schmoozy things that make you feel kind of gross. I would say, okay, so there is one exercise that I sometimes suggest to folks who are, if you're a spreadsheet kind of person, this is a David Diamond exercise. That's what I think I told you this, Kathryn.
You did, and okay. I've done it, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So you write this down, or okay, anyway, open up an Excel spreadsheet, make 5 columns, right? Column 1 is people who have no idea who you are, but you want them to know you, but they have no idea who you are. 2 are people who have heard of you, right? But they haven't seen your work, but they know your name, but they haven't seen your work. Column 3 is people who know you, who know who you are and have seen one of your plays, or have worked, or have seen one of your pieces, right? Number 4 is people you've actually worked with, right? And number 5 is your fans, people who are like, I will go to bat for this person. I will like talk a good game for you, right? So you have a spectrum of those. And you have to sit down one night and just, have a nice club soda. I would say wine, but most of y'all can't drink. Or a bag of chips or something. Have some snacks. Bust out your Facebook, your social media, your address book, everybody you know in the theater, and populate the spreadsheet. And hopefully someone who's a 5 knows someone who's a 1. And that's like the magical expression. You go, the person who's a 5, can you drop an email about me to the person who's a 1 that I want to know? And you just kind of, and the goal is over the course of your career, move people from column 1 over to column 5. And it takes a while because I did this 10 years ago, and slowly but surely, it takes time. And one by one, oh, I'm working with so-and-so, that person got moved over. Oh, that person I just met at a cocktail party. I went to open it, met so-and-so, that person got moved over. So slowly people kind of shift in these columns for you, right? So that's like one nuts and bolts practical way of doing it. The other thing is know where you want to work, right? Networking without an intention. Be intentional about where you want to be. Don't spend your energy networking in places you don't. If you're not interested in Shakespeare, don't. Right? Unless you want. Unless you don't know, in which case, sure. But there's also intentionality behind that too.
I had a great friend say once, like, don't get upset you didn't get invited to a party you didn't actually want to go to.
Right. Yeah. 100%. Right. So knowing that is one thing. And then, you Google all the fellowships, internships, look at the Drama League. They have great programs for directors. Like a number of theaters in town, like Seattle Rep has an internship program, I believe. Like so does ACT, right? Most LORT theaters have some kind of internship, assistantship program that supports young directors. And for me, because I was really interested in a Korean regional theater, the challenge was, how do I keep assisting? You email and say, do you need an assistant director? You would assist at big theaters, and I would direct my little garage play, right? Do your scrappy work, do the stuff that like serves you and like feeds you while you're working as a coffee munchkin for the Fifth Avenue. They will never do that to you though. The Fifth will never treat you as a coffee munchkin. But work as a small fish in a big pond, but keep being the big pond in your own small, be the big fish in your small pond. That's what I meant to say. Because I think oftentimes you get lost in the hustle and you forget to make the work that's important to you, right? So it's exhausting. It is time consuming, and everyone else is doing it too, right? But so just kind of do all the things and then take a Zen approach about it, right? Because you ultimately can't control where the things go, because it's like dating. You can't force someone to date you. All you can do is hang around at the same parties enough to where they maybe notice you, and you can ask him for a drink or something, you know? Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have like 2 more minutes? I'm asking the adult panelists. Do you have like 2 more minutes? Because Maya has a really good question that I think everyone would benefit from hearing, including myself. I'm taking notes.
Sure.
Go ahead, Maya.
Okay. How do you recommend like approaching shows or scenes that deal with like heavier or edgier content?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it depends on what the nature of the difficulty is, right? I think you do have to be, communication, first of all, is always super important. If you're dealing with intimacy, then having an intimacy director is really important. Advocate for one. If you're theater, and here's the thing, sometimes theaters don't provide those resources for you, right? And then it is up to you whether or not you still want the job, right? If someone was asking me to do a really, really intense, potentially dangerous, potentially triggering piece and did not have an intimacy director or a budget for one, I may not take the job, right? Because I think that's something, because of the way power dynamics work, no matter how good my intentions are, right, I cannot account for the ways that I might unknowingly create harm in the room. And I do think it's important to just know that, advocate for the structures in place. But that would be my kind of first pass. It's a big question. And I think because it varies from show to show and what the nature of the heaviness is. But always, always ask for institutional support on it. It's never your job to fix it, right? It is not your job. It is your job to create like a safe working environment, but there must be policies in place, right? Policies to like reporting policies, like third parties in the room, right? Like support staff, assistant, things like that should always be in play. Yeah.
Kathryn, do you have anything to add?
The thing that like came up for me with that question is I hope that we are in a moment, as theaters have had to like, take a year off and think about what they've done. And we see White American Theater, right? And Broadway for Racial Justice, and all of these movements are happening. And conversations around unsafe spaces in rehearsal rooms are really coming to the forefront in a way that I don't think they certainly haven't in my lifetime, but I don't think they ever have in the history of our industry. I find myself like so hopeful in this moment that by the time like you have graduated from high school or college, that like that it won't even be a question on the table, right? That like you will graduate, you will matriculate into a world where it is the norm to have all of those support systems and those support structures in place. And that just the option of that feels really optimistic. The only other piece that I would add is remember that you are also an artist in the room with history and experience and traumas and triggers, right? So remember to prioritize your own health and safety and well-being in preparing to direct or lead something, as much as you are trying to create a space that is safe for the rest of the artists and people in the room.
There's also one other piece that, and this is not quite the question, but it's connected. I think I also have to ask myself sometimes, like, why is the theater programming this material, and is it necessary?
Mm-hmm.
I just completed an anonymous survey. And one of the questions was, how should we handle, what is the best way to handle productions where there is racialized violence, right? And I go, well, first of all, ask your theater why you feel compelled to produce a play that has racialized. And like, how do you protect the people of color? Or how do you protect our BIPOC artists? And I was like, well, why are you harming them to begin with? To where we have to somehow find support, right? So I think even, and that's not what the question is asking, but I do think that does come up. Like, do you need to do this play? For whose benefit? And if there is, and I'm not saying that it doesn't have benefits, but you have to kind of go back to the deeper question of why this play, why now? It's not our job as directors because we're not producing them, but you can absolutely interrogate those questions with the producer and the theater who's hiring you.
Boom, that is an amazing note to end our question and answer today. You guys have really just encompassed every and any aspect of directing, at least from the beginning of directing, and even further in, once you get to an actual, I'm in awe. I bow down. I thank you. And I thank all of you, audience members, for hanging out with us today. Please give yourself some snaps, hand on the back, anything that to applaud you for being here, because this is important information that being shared with such young minds. You guys are hopefully going to take this and just continue to rise. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our student panelists. Thank you to our guest panelists. And again, thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you, Jeremy, for all the backstage work. If you like Fridays at the Fifth, please consider supporting it. We are committed to offering Fridays at the Fifth for free for all of you, but there is a bit of a cost associated. So if you're able to, just find our website. There's a donation button on there, and Jeremy will drop it in the chat. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here. And yes, I'm glad that you took all this knowledge. I hope you took notes. But for our panelists, what should we check out that you're up to? I know, Desdemona, you will be in our upcoming radio play at the Fifth.
Yeah, I'm directing the next radio musical at the Fifth Avenue. It's called The Lamplighter, written by Justin Huertas, Sarah Porkalov, and Kiki Helland. And we start rehearsals on Monday. So fun.
And to find that information, if you're already a subscriber, you'll already get it once it launches. If not, keep an eye on our website, www.fifthav.org. And as soon as it's available, they will let you know. Also, Maya, what's there to do around town that you wanted to shout out today?
Well, my mom works at a bakery in Belltown. It's called Asketu Bakery. They have all allergen-free goodies and treats. If you're gluten-free, dairy-free, can't have soy or anything, it's the best place to go. So definitely go check that out. And their is Asketu Bakery, and check them out on Instagram.
Fabulous. It's really good. I definitely went and cleaned them out last weekend because we are vegan over here. So they make a lot of good things that we vegans can't eat. So please go eat them, especially if you have allergies. And Kathryn, I know that you were doing some digging into what's going on specifically with equity in New York right now. Please talk to us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yesterday was the March on Broadway. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of artists gathered and did a march in New York to raise awareness and put some pressure on Actors Equity, which is the acting union, who is currently in the middle of a national convention. The march was organized by Natalie Randall and Courtney Daniels, and Jeremy's going to put some links in the chat to some Instagram handles of some places and folks that you can like latch onto and do a little deep dive to hear some pretty pretty incredible speeches yesterday by Brandon Michael Ney spoke, Eden Espinoza spoke, Ashley De La Rosa spoke. There's a big movement that is happening in New York, and I'm sure will trickle down into the regional theater scene. And as the advocates, I'm sure you all are, it'll be exciting to dig in and learn more about it.
And I'm going to just say those real quick for the folks who watch this in post. So one's at Random Black Girl with, it looks like 4 L's, 1, 2, 3, 4 L's. The next one is at 50, the number 50 mile run for justice protest. And then last one is at Broadway for racial justice. And those are all on Instagram, but I'm sure if you find them on Instagram, they may or may not have a website associated. And last but not least, Ives, what do you have cooking up?
So sometime in the next few days, I'm leading a discussion here at my theater at Willamette University on We See You White American Theater. So I wanted to extend to all of you a link to go check out that website, check out their action items, and check out what they're doing to call out white supremacy in American theater. It's a really great website with a lot of great resources written by a lot of great people. So I really recommend checking out that little website.
Ives, is your conversation that you're leading open to people?
Unfortunately, it's not. I really wish it was, but I might bring that up with my fellow members of our student advisory board to see if that's something we can do in the future.
Okay.
And if so, I might contact some of you and see if we can get that information sent out into the internet.
Yes, if there's anything that you folks want to share with me afterwards, I can always update the website. And there's usually about a week later, we put all the things that you talked about. So I'll drop down these book titles and some of the activities that you spoke about, Desdemona, and all the different things that you've talked about and boasted about here at the end. So that's really exciting too. You guys can just go straight to our website under education, Fridays at the 5th, and then all of these informationals will be there. And internally, we really love to incorporate our students in all the things that we do. So keep an eye out for the Rising Star Project, 10-minute quarantine musicals, which currently is doing a run through tonight or read through tonight. So they're cooking up, and I know that they're going to launch in June. So excited about that. And then we also have the High School Award Challenge, which on our way out, Jeremy's going to put a slide up, but we are taking challenges from not only producers and directors, wink, wink, directors, producers, directors, stage managers, costume folks, to as far as a proposal challenge for how you would put on a show. And the two top people who are chosen will actually be associated and put into our Jimmy Awards, which normally in non-COVID times would be in New York, but completely free of charge, sponsored by the 5th, to compete against other schools nationwide. So Jeremy just dropped a link in the chat. Definitely check it out. Make your audition video, proposal video, challenge video, and keep your fingers crossed because we're excited to see all of those challenges. We hope you enjoyed your time here today. Thank you again for kicking it with us. Some of you are back in person and others are still doing the theater online thing. But until we all can be in the same room again, remember, wash those hands, 20 seconds or more, stay safe, keep making art, and keep having real conversations about what's happening in our world, in our country, in our industry, and in our communities. And keep on keeping on. We'll see you folks next time. Bye-bye. Thanks again.
I got it. Feeling it for the moment. Don't stop. Celebrate the feels. Roll up. Feeling it for the moment. Don't stop.
Great job,